welcome everyone who's here today. Also want to remind people, some of you just came in late, or not late, but later than others. We're asking people to mute their, put on their microphones during the presentation. And again, if you have questions during the presentation, please put them in the chat so that I can, and I will go through the questions and ask as many as I can at the end of the presentation. So today I'm delighted to introduce Eddy Cumins. Eddy is the general manager of the Sonoma Marin Area Rail Transit District, otherwise known as SMART. As general manager, he's responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operation of SMART's transit and freight service. Eddy is also responsible for planning and construction of SMART's multi-use pathway network and rail extensions. Prior to joining SMART, he served as prior to joining SMART in November of 2021, he served as Chief Operating Officer of the Utah Transit Authority. Eddy earned a Master of Science degree in Organizational Leadership from Colorado State University and holds a BS in Human Resource Development from Southwestern College. Would you please welcome Eddy Cumins? Mute. Eddy, you're muted.
There we go. You think I'd be used to this by now. I was just saying, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that. Very happy to be here today. Share some updates on SMART. I will share my screen. Give me just a second. Everybody see my screen okay? Mm-hmm. Awesome. Thank you very much. So again, I just wanted to provide a quick update on SMART, some of the things that we have going on, things I'll go over today, just talking about some of our recent initiatives that we've implemented, some upcoming improvements we have in the pipeline. Wanted to share where we are with ridership and kind of how that is growing, what it's looking like in the future. Wanted to talk about the Windsor and Healdsburg funding. There's been a lot of developments in that area as of late, so I want to just hit on that a little bit. Talk about some of the challenges that face SMART or that faces SMART in the future. And then I want to talk about how SMART's a solution in the community. And then of course, at the end, be happy to open it up for any questions you may have. So starting with recent initiatives, one of the first things we've done is we've fully restored service. We're currently running 38 weekday midday trips, and we're running 12 trips on the weekends. We extended our 40% discount on fares. Now we're just $1.50 per zone, so very affordable. We suspended parking fees at the SMART-owned parking rides, and I think that was a big one. That's something that kind of jumped out at me. When I first got here, I was out driving around just looking at our parking rides and noticed that our parking rides were not being utilized to the greatest extent possible. And I'm driving along, I'm checking each station, and it was very interesting to me. When I got to Cotati, Cotati station was packed full. There wasn't an empty parking place there. So I came back to the office and I asked staff, I was like, what's going on? Why are there limited use at all the parking rides? However, Cotati's plumb full. And there's like, oh, it's because that one's free. And the reason was because the city of Cotati owns that parking ride. They don't charge for parking. So I took it to the board and said, hey, I think this is something we ought to try. Let's eliminate the parking fees at our parking rides, see if that's causing any issues for us. And it was very interesting. About 3 or 4 weeks later, obviously we'd got a baseline of what our utilization was. Utilization at the parking rides went up triple-digit percentage at every single parking ride immediately. And we had one station that went up like 800%, which was just fascinating. So I think we're going to continue that for some time, and until we'll reevaluate in the future. So we improved our weekend connections to the Larkspur Ferry. That was another thing that was a big initiative for us. We facilitated a Muirwood shuttle connection at Larkspur on the weekends. We worked with Google to improve our trip planning. One of the things that we identified is just planning a trip using Google Maps we identified that that wasn't always providing the best information as to how to utilize our system or our pathways. And so we identified all those issues, got on the phone with Google, and was able to fix those problems in there. We implemented Giants Game Service. And this is relatively new. We started a free field trip for K through 12 students. And this has been something that's really just been huge. I mean, we have all sorts of schools and teachers reaching out to us and utilizing this program. We're asking them to travel during non-peak hours. So after, somewhere between like 9 and 3 in the afternoon. But that's been a big one. And then we improved access to real-time train location data. I have a picture of that over on the right-hand side of the screen. But if you use Google Maps and you use that for your travel and you put in, it'll identify your location, and it'll also track the train. If you're looking at that on your computer or on your phone, you can actually see the train moving. It updates about every 10 seconds. And anyway, it'll tell you in real time when the train will arrive at your location. Upcoming improvements. We are working on our microtransit project at the airport. And basically what we'll be doing is providing a connection from the airport station to the airport. We're using a concept that's called microtransit. This is very similar to kind of like Uber and Lyft. It uses technology and does dynamic routing. We have already secured our technology provider for this service, and we're currently working on contracting with an operator. There's a chance that we may get that done by Friday. And if we do, we'll take it to the March 15th board meeting. However, there is a chance that we will not get all those interviews conducted and be able to select a vendor by Friday. And if that's the case, then the contract would go to the April meeting. We are anticipating an expected launch date of sometime in May or June, depending on how this all works out. But I think that's going to be a big service for us. That's something I hear a lot about in the community. People want to utilize the train to get to the airport, but it is a mile from the station to the actual airport. So hopefully this will close the gap. And I think, in this presentation, you'll hear me talk about SMART's first and last mile challenges. And I think that this is something that can close that gap if it works. We're calling this a pilot project. We're going to see how it works. But if this is something that works well at the airport station, this is something that can be duplicated throughout the system in the future at other stations. We're also considering allowing overnight parking. Right now, we do not allow that. But I think if you are providing a connection to the airport, that's going to be the first question on people's minds of, well, why would I take the train to the airport if I can't park my car in the station overnight? So that'll be something that we'll be taking a look at as we look at implementing microtransit. We're also looking at a Friday, Saturday night, late evening. We're calling it the dinner train. This is something, again, will be a pilot project. We'll try it for this summer, see how it works. And we're anticipating starting that in May. That'll be a later night train that'll be running, somewhere around 9, 10 o'clock at night, allow people to take the train to dinner and then have that trip home. The board also approved a free summer youth pass. I think that was last meeting or maybe the meeting before. And we're partnering with most of the Bay Area transit providers, the bus providers in the area. This will provide free fare from June through August for all youth 6 to 18 years old. So we'll be working through that as well. We have the construction of the Petaluma North Station. We're anticipating that station will be open by July 2024, building pathway segments. And that'll be going on through 23 through 25. We have Petaluma to Pingrove, Roanoke Park to Santa Rosa. We're also working on McGinnis to Smith Ranch Road. That'll be in 24. And we currently have 10 segments that are in design. So there'll be more pathway construction coming in the future. That is something that we have identified as a priority. And so we'll be funding those segments in the future. Real-time electronic train arrival signage. We're hoping to get that up in fall of 23. Again, this would just be signage that would be up similar to what you can see on an app telling you when the next train should be arriving. And then pathway and wayfinding signage, we're anticipating starting that project in FY24. So all these things that we've done and things that we have in the pipeline, one of the good things that we've seen is that it actually has had an impact on ridership. We are heading in the right direction. The latest information where we can see what all transit providers in the Bay Area are doing is on the National Transit Database. And the latest information that's out there right now is December of 22. This usually falls behind about a month or two. So January will be coming out real soon, but December 22 is what's out there right now. And currently SMART has the second highest ridership recovery ratio when compared to pre-pandemic levels. So right now we're at about 82%. In December, we were at 82% of our pre-pandemic ridership, second only to Marin Transit. This is really good for us. There's a big difference traditionally between commuter rail ridership and bus ridership. And so if you compare us to other rail providers, as you can see identified in green, we're doing quite well. And so this is good to see. There was in October of 22, we were actually had the best ridership recovery ratio. We've fallen down just a little bit. The rain is doing us no favors. I can tell you, I did an analysis a few weeks ago, but ridership's down for us about 45% on rainy days versus sunny days. And so we need the rain, but it's better for ridership when the sun is shining. So this shows our average weekday ridership. You can see that in February, we finished with about 71% of our pre-pandemic ridership. We averaged 2,128 riders a day. Ridership was up over 52% over March 22. In March, we're at 2,111 right now. We're up 52% over March 22 and about 90% of our pre-COVID ridership. And so again, we're comparing to March of 2019 in that number. So at the beginning of the year, we're on a fiscal year. So last June, we set a ridership goal of 594,000 riders this year. I received a lot of emails, people saying that they thought that that was too high of a number, didn't think that SMART could hit that number, didn't think that our ridership would recover that much. We knew we had things in line. We knew that we had things in place that thought we were going to grow our ridership. So we stuck with that number. And this kind of shows how we're doing. We set a goal for each month. And you can see we kind of started off a little rough, a little bit below our goal, minus 4% in August, minus 10% in September. And then we kind of started to hit our stride. And in October, we exceeded by 18.6%. November, we were up. December, January, with all the rains and the flooding, we dropped down a little bit, but February was good to us. And we exceeded our goal by 9.1%. So as I mentioned, the goal for our ridership goal for this year is 594,000. Currently, we've carried 384,029. That's through February. Our goal year to date through February would be 384,029. We've carried 395,348. So we're exceeding our year to date goal by 2.9%. So if this holds true, we're on pace to probably break 600,000 riders this fiscal year. So that's a good sign of things to come. Now I'll switch gears a little bit and talk about Windsor and Healdsburg funding. This was in the news quite a bit, so I just wanted to explain it a little bit. And the easiest way for me to explain it was these puzzle pieces. And so the first puzzle piece come with Regional Measure 3. Those dollars were released just a few weeks ago, and that freed up $40 million for this project. We were also successful in the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program. We call that TIRCP. Round one, SMART secured $34 million for this project. And then all the time that we were waiting on RM3, we were out doing work, we were seeking grants, pulling funds together, and we had already pulled together $44 million for this project. So in total, we have $118 million right now. The total project cost is about $251 million. So we need $113 more million. And we have 3 grant requests that are out there that are outstanding right now. We have Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program, round 2. Our request is for $55 million. We anticipate hearing back on that grant request in April of 23. Then there's Solution for Congested Corridor. The request for that one is $30 million. And that will be, we'll hear about that one in June of 23. And then there is the CRISI grant, which is a federal grant. The request there is $28 million. We anticipate an announcement on that one in June of 2023. And I will likely be going to DC to talk to folks about this one, gain some support for this particular grant request, probably in late March or April. So the kicker to this story is that if we're able to pull all these pieces together, we'll be able to solve this funding puzzle, and we will have all the dollars required to extend our rail line all the way to Healdsburg. So what are some of our challenges? I think, first off, for me, achieving future success requires work, commitment, and agility. It's something that I talk to staff about all the time. We're not where we want to be as an agency. We have a long way to go. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. There's all these things that I'm going to mention going on, and that's why I say we have to stay agile and we have to be able to adjust to our changing issues. So future challenges. Pandemic impact. Work from home is a real thing. We watch these numbers. We watch kind of what's going on in the community. Right now, most people are working from home at least a certain number of days a week. It looks like right now, most folks that do go to the office are going to work probably 3 days a week. And those days are traditionally Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. We notice that in our ridership. Mondays and Fridays are typically our lowest ridership days. But this is a real thing. I think that even long term, all the information I read, I think that we will see that most people, probably maybe 25% of the people will continue this work from home. And so I don't think the world's ever going to go back to the way it was pre-pandemic. And so it's just something we need to be aware of. We need to adjust for it and make sure that our services meet the needs of the community. First and last mile is a real challenge for SMART. Any transit agency you go to in the country, they will talk about first and last mile. It's always a challenge. Even at UTA, where I was at before coming to SMART, I owned the whole system. I had bus, I had rail, I had light rail, I had paratransit, I had bus, van pool, you name it. I had all the aspects, and still we sat around and talked about how do we serve first and last mile challenges. So first and last mile is a challenge for all transit agencies, but it really is a tough one for SMART to crack. And there's a couple of reasons why. One is the station locations, where they're located. One of the biggest challenges that we have is that we currently run 32-minute headways. So we have a single track system. Our trains can only pass each other at certain locations. And so, with that, we can only run the train so frequently. The challenge with that is that most bus agencies run on a 30-minute frequency. And so it's difficult to get the buses and the trains to line up so that there's that seamless first and last mile solution in place. So that's a big one for us. That's why we think that there's a possibility that this dynamic kind of on-demand microtransit project could be a solution for our first and last mile challenges. I think completing projects has to be a big priority for us. As we talk to the bicycle community, they'll tell you, hey, show us the money type thing. They want to see concrete in the ground. And that's what that looks like. We're making progress on that. So pathways is a big one for us. Rail extensions is another one. When we did our extensions listening session, what I heard from the public is, hey, you promised Measure Q to get the train to Cloverdale, and that's what we need to see happen. I provided an extensions follow-up to that listening session last meeting with the board, and kind of laid out a strategy of, number one, getting the train to Windsor and Healdsburg, but then a kind of a more long-term strategy of how to get it all the way to Cloverdale. Measure Q is kind of always the elephant in the room for us. I know that this group is well aware of this, but Measure Q sales tax expires in 2029. SMART has to have a sales tax to continue to do what it does. And so at some point, we've got to be prepared to get that sales tax extended into the future. And then public perception, when I was coming to SMART, this is the one challenge that I identified. Probably, obviously, it's aligned with the Measure Q, but public perception was one of the biggest challenges I identified. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of reading, just trying to get the temperature of the community of where they were and how they perceived SMART. A lot of the work I've done has been around trying to improve that piece of public perception. I feel like we've made some level of progress, but I'm not naive enough to believe that it's where it needs to be. And so we still have some improvements that we need to do in regard to public perception. And that's obviously a top priority for me and my staff. So focus areas for me, number one is that the train meets the needs of the community, whatever that means. And I talk to staff about that all the time. We recently added some midday trips. Typically for a commuter train, midday is not where you make your money. But listening to the public, that was one of the things they identified and said, hey, I could use the train more, but it doesn't really meet my needs. I really need this midday trip. And so we got creative with our staffing and how we could do things. And we were able to add those 2 midday trips that helped a lot of people out. And believe it or not, those trips are doing quite well and continue to gain ridership. So long-term, we'll continue to take a look at those and see how they perform and make minor adjustments as required. And then another one, kind of this public perception piece is that I want SMART to be viewed as a solution in the community. So let's talk about that. How is SMART a solution in the community? And, coming into this meeting and my communication with Kevin, he said, hey, help the league understand what we can do to help SMART. And I think this is part of it. We have to start talking about how SMART's a solution. Many of you have probably heard me say this numerous times, but my first year here, I felt like, as I was out speaking to groups like this, I kind of felt like I was on an apology tour, going, okay, yeah, we didn't do that quite right. We need to do this better. We're going to work on this. We're going to work on that. And I think we've worked on a lot of those things, but I think it's time to start to change the focuses and help people understand how SMART is actually a solution in the community. So here's a few things. Number one, the environmental impact. It does reduce highway congestion. Our FY23 ridership projections, 594,000 riders. Projected FY23 passenger miles, 13 million miles. So our average rider rides about 21 miles when they get on the train. So if you do 594,000 multiplied by 21, you come up with 13 million. Reduces carbon footprint of riders. Our projected FY23 CO2 savings about 710 tons. And we help businesses meet their sustainability goals. Shared modes of transportation have a positive impact on both the social and environmental aspects of corporate sustainability. So really that just gets down to what's the better use of your time, sitting in traffic or, being on the train, kind of relaxing, maybe even doing some work. Provides access to opportunity. This is a big one. It helps people get to education, jobs, and better healthcare. Bidirectional workforce transport. This is a recent addition to this slide. And the reason I put it in there is because the number of times, especially when I'm in Marin County, that people think that people only go southbound in the morning. And that's absolutely not true. When we look at our ridership in the morning in the AM commute, about 60% of our riders are going southbound and about 40% are going northbound. A big portion of that AM commute are students in Marin County going to Sonoma County for school. So it's just very interesting, but I just wanted people to be aware of that it's not just a train going down full of people and then deadheading back to the north. There's people on there going both directions. Continuing on, when we extend our rail line to Windsor, Healdsburg, and then eventually on to Cloverdale, there's this opportunity for a broadband partnership. Right now, we have a partnership with Sonic where they have a shared conduit and they can provide broadband to cities along our alignment. Economic development. It's a proven fact that commuter rail is a catalyst for economic development. And the way I look at it, every rider on the train is either an employee or a customer. And then commuter rail expands the reach for recruiting talent. And well, let me hit this last bullet before I expand on that. Promotes economic development while sustaining quality of life. It's been one of the interesting things for me about the economic development piece and what commuter rail can bring to a community. You know, where I was at in Utah, anytime, you know, that's an area that the population is anticipated that it's going to double by the year of 2050. And so there's lots of business and lots of people moving into that area right now. And one of the things that was always interesting to me is that I was always having city managers call me, and they were wanting me to come in and educate them on transit, what we had to offer, help them understand our transit system. And I asked one city manager one day, I was like, help me understand, why are all the city managers all of a sudden calling me, wanting to understand our transit system, and especially commuter rail? And he said, well, he said, every business that's thinking about relocating here, that's one of the first things that they want to know is how the transit system is going to support this area. And they want to know, and one thing that they would always say is that it expands their reach for talent. And so I don't feel like SMART, you know, and the commuter rail aspects of it have been accepted in this community in Sonoma and Marin County the way it has in other places. But I can tell you, if you look at how other commuter rails have performed throughout the country, there's real opportunity here for SMART and our community. Affordable housing, again, expands the area and provides access to more affordable housing, and it spurs development around stations. Again, not something that we've seen here too much, but the opportunity is there. Active transportation solution. We currently have 24 miles of pathway constructed. Something that's been very surprising to me, and I love it, is that 18% of our riders that get on board have a bicycle with them. So our bicycle community is a large portion of our ridership. And it was very interesting that a lot of those bicycle commuters and riders, they stayed with us through the pandemic. So this percentage of riders has gone down over the last several months as our riderships continue to climb. But that bicycle ridership continues to grow at the same time ridership is. So bicyclists are a huge part of our ridership. Also on our pathways in the past 30 days, we've had 8,000 riders or walkers that have passed our new bike and ped counters on Anderson Drive. So lots of people are utilizing the pathway. Train's also good for emergency response, you know, and if there's a fire situation or something like that, of a reason we needed to evacuate, obviously the train could evacuate a lot of people quickly. There's also potential with water delivery if that was ever needed or required. Obviously right now we seem to be getting plenty of rain, but you know, it was just a while back that we had a real shortage. So in the future, if that becomes a problem, our freight train could deliver water. And speaking of freight opportunities, inbound, outbound connection to the national rail network is a big thing. It can reduce truck traffic on our highways. And there is really a potential cost savings for local businesses who are currently utilizing trucks to bring in their freight currently. And with that, I would be happy to take any questions. And I will stop share so I can see everybody.
Thank you, Eddie,
Thank you.
for that very informative presentation. So again, I want to remind people, if they have questions, please put them in the chat and I will screen them and ask as many as we can. So one issue, Eddie, is a lot of area transit agencies and maybe transit agencies all over the country they've received a lot of federal dollars during COVID. And that money is running out. In fact, there's going to be a big issue as to how some of the larger transit agencies, certainly in the Bay Area, BART, Muni, Golden Gate Transit, how they're going to be able to continue to operate in the next, after 2025. So what are SMART's plans for dealing with this situation?
Actually, we're in pretty decent shape. There was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle a couple of weeks ago that talked about this topic. But we're actually in pretty good shape. Really what this comes down to is how dependent an agency is on fare box recovery, and how they're funded. SMART's in pretty good shape as it is right now, so we're not necessarily facing the fiscal cliff that others are. However, there is a transit system, and so we do worry about, and we are here to support our partners. And so your BARTs and your Caltrains and your Golden Gate Transits, and those that are facing that fiscal cliff, we want to support them in any way that we possibly can. But being directly impacted, we're probably not there. We're okay. But that's the difference between when an agency is, solely dependent upon their fare box recovery, or if they have another funding source like we do with the sales tax initiative.
Okay, thank you. So you mentioned that the SMART's received a lot of capital monies for their project. For example, the expansion to Healdsburg and Windsor, although you're still hoping to get more. But the crux of your operating system comes through the sales tax monies. So, and at the last election, you needed a 2/3 vote to expand or extend the sales tax. And if I recall correctly, you got about 55%. This is for total combination of both Marin and Sonoma. So, as you mentioned, you're going to need to somehow in the near future get the sales tax renewed, and that requires a 2/3 vote. So, how do you go from? You've talked about some of these strategies that you're employing right now, but going from about 55% to 67%. So, one, when do you suspect that you'd consider going back on the ballot? And two, what kind of strategy do you have to get that additional difference?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that we have to do. I do not have a timeline as to when we go back to the voters. I think that I think everybody would agree with me. There's still a lot of work to do, right? And I don't think that anybody thinks that if we were go to the voters today, that we would get 2/3 of the vote. So that tells me that there's still a ton of work to do. One is making sure that the system meets the needs of the community. One is gaining folks' trust, right? People have to trust SMART. Building our ridership is a big one. I obviously right now we're focused on recovery of getting back to where we were pre-pandemic, where we were in January, February of 2020. But I can tell you and others that my sights are set well beyond pre-pandemic ridership. I want to see 5,000 plus riders on the train daily. And I think that there's just a lot of work that needs to be done. We need to make sure that the train meets the needs of the community, and we just have to continue to do that work. But I'm keeping an open mind. I'm adjusting. I think coming out to things like this, interacting with the public, hearing what the public wants to see, hearing their advice, answering their questions. And really, I think we have to build the trust of the community, and we have to make sure the train meets the needs of the community.
Okay. We've had several questions regarding the bike paths. Can you talk a little bit about one, what the bike paths are? A lot of people, there's still some questions about where they will go. Do they always go adjacent to the trackway, et cetera? And in the general scheme of things, what percentage completion has SMART completed the planned paths as of right now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So yes, we're talking about adjacent to our alignment, in or near the SMART right of way. Right now, we've completed 25 miles. Obviously, we want that across or, adjacent to the rail line all the way down. And then, of course, that in the future, that would continue on to Windsor, Healdsburg, and Cloverdale. So there's a lot of pathway that's left to be built. Percentage wise, we're probably, I don't know what that is, maybe 45 to 50%. So there's still a lot of pathway that needs to be built. This segment in Pingrove and Santa Rosa, that's a big piece of it. So that's going to help us to meet some of those goals. But that's what we hear from the bicycle community. The pathway is a big part of this. It was a big selling point when this was put on the ballot originally. So it's a top priority and something we've been working with the board on to make sure that we fund and we continue to make progress.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. A couple location-specific questions. Are there any plans to expand SMART to closer to the ferry than where you are right now?
There's no current plans. I was just reading a thing this morning. I think it was a letter, and I think it was in the Press Democrat. I saw it just before I jumped on here, so not 100% sure it was a PD article, but I think it was. And somebody was bringing that up. There's no current plans. I don't remember all the history. There was a history as to why it stopped where it did. But I do think that we need to figure out how to make a connection there. It is a long walk for folks. I think there's potential that this microtransit idea that we were talking about at the airport could also serve an area like that. So that's on our minds. Also, there's future opportunity for maybe an autonomous vehicle that would operate there. We were working with an autonomous vehicle provider about 3 or 4 months ago, kind of exploring that idea. Unfortunately, the technology wasn't there to make it happen right now, but that's something that's on our mind. So we are working on what that would look like and how we can make that connection better. I don't have a solution today, but it is something that's on our minds, and we do receive quite a bit of feedback about that walk from the train station to the ferry terminal. So that is a priority for us and one that we're working on a solution for. But microtransit does have a real opportunity to work there.
Okay. We've had a comment or question regarding what's the status, if any, of possibly elevating the trains above downtown San Rafael?
So I haven't done any work associated with elevating the tracks in San Rafael.
Okay. I know that as a resident of San Rafael, I'm constantly hearing people who complain about getting stuck in traffic in downtown San Rafael. So that is an area of concern for at least some people. And then there was a question about can you talk a little bit about the Jennings crossing grade issue and what SMART's position is on that? Yeah,
we met with the community there. I think it was last Wednesday or Thursday. The city, laid out their proposal. I laid out my concerns. We're going to continue to work with the city on that. I do have some concerns there. I can't lie, but we're going to work with the city,
Eddie, can you, for those of us who aren't familiar with that particular issue, can you define it a little more clearly? And then
yeah, so this is in Santa Rosa. There's currently a walk around, but there's Jennings Avenue is cut off by the tracks. I guess traditionally or in the past, that was a place where people crossed the railroad tracks in the community. The community, a lot of folks that live there would like to see a pedestrian crossing at that particular location. Right now, it is 0.6 miles to walk around. So if you are, rather than crossing Jennings Avenue, if you wanted to walk, if you had to walk around it, it's 0.6 miles on a pathway up and around to get there. Obviously, if there was an at-grade crossing, you could cross straight over from that point. There's several in that community that really want to see that be a grade crossing. I went and presented there last week with the city of Santa Rosa. City of Santa Rosa is supportive of a grade crossing there. I do have my concerns. It's about a little over of a quarter of a mile to go up and cross the tracks on Guerneville Road. But you know, this is something that the community wants. I have my concerns about it. I'm really fearful that that bad things could happen there. And I would prefer to do an overcrossing. I went and pitched the idea of an overcrossing at this location last week. We're waiting on feedback from the community to get back on that to see where it lands. I can tell you, I think the vibe in the room that day was most people that were in there preferred not to have an overcrossing. They wanted the at-grade crossing, but I did lay out my concerns about that. You know, there are kids who cross there. You know, we all know that sometimes kids can, you know, not make great decisions and run out in front of the train there. But I put that out to the community. I laid out my concerns. But you know, we're partners with the city of Santa Rosa, and once we get all of public feedback we'll sit down with the city and have this conversation and see where we land. But it does concern me. You know, I would prefer to do an overcrossing at that location because a fatality does scare me there. I know that, you know, there's an elementary school on one side, there's a daycare center, or maybe a preschool on the other side. So this would be traveled a lot by children, and I do worry about that. I said this before, but I probably wasn't always the best kid, and I know how I was as a kid, and sometimes that concerns me. So I worry about those things, and that's what we went to do at that meeting last week, was to pitch that to the public of doing an overcrossing. I don't know where it'll land. I haven't seen the feedback from those who were unable to attend, but the vibe that I got in the room, I think the majority of people preferred the at-grade crossing at that location, at least those who were in attendance.
Okay, thank you. We have a comment and the comment is, thanks for your support of SMART as a benefit for housing, given the desperate need for employees and services and caregivers. We need this. What outreach has SMART done in Novato, San Rafael, and Larkspur about housing opportunities near SMART stations?
So I think I understand that question. Is have we talked about any type of transit-oriented development in those areas? I don't know that there's been any direct conversations in that I've been a part of in Marin County. There's obviously been some of those in Sonoma County. You know, we do own property throughout the area. You know, the term is called transit-oriented development. That was really a big deal where I came from in Utah. You know, anywhere around our commuter rail station was absolutely prime real estate, and people really focused on, you know, building high density units next to commuter rail and light rail. And so we're open to those conversations. You know, I think that there's some real opportunities along our alignment to be able to do things like that. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, communities have to be supportive of those things and, you know, need to be a part of their long range plans.
Okay.
And so I guess SMART's role in that is to be a part of those conversations and be a partner with the community.
Another comment, how is SMART incorporating planning and design for sea rise level in its design of multi-purpose path build out? And in particular, the McGinnis to Smith Ranch Road gap along the Salinas Creek Marsh and future extensions and improvements, for example, State Route 37 across the wetlands along San Pablo Bay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those things are on our mind of what that looks like in the future. And, you know, our engineering staff, that's something they always have on their mind of what we need to do in the future. Highway 37 is probably the one that's most near and dear to my heart, because during the recent storms in January, that area was closed. And we had about a week and a half to 2 weeks there that we were unable to run our freight. And so there were times that we were, 2 to 3 feet underwater along that stretch of Highway 37. And so we definitely need to think through those things. We are part of the Highway 37 committee, that's looking at those things, but I envision there that we will need an elevated track through that area. But we'll continue to work with our partners as to what that looks like. But we are concerned about sea level rise. Those are some things that we factor in and know that those are things that we're going to have to address in the future. And our staff is working to plan those things of what that'll look like.
Okay, there's a question or comment about ridership versus cost. And the comment here is, this person suggests that a round trip is subsidized by about $124. Again, I can't verify that that's an actual cost, but
No.
I've heard that criticism before.
Yeah, so no, that number is no longer correct. I think during pandemic times, that number was probably accurate, but the number they're using is probably a little old. Our number right now is probably in the 40s as a subsidy. That's a number that needs to come down. That's something that I'm planning probably maybe for the April or the May board meeting, is I need to help the public understand how that number is calculated and how it's influenced. But right now that number's, I believe, in the 40s. But it's still too high. I won't hide behind that. We need to bring that number down. And you do it two ways: one, by controlling your cost, and two, increasing your ridership. So there's a certain level of sunk cost of your engineers, your conductors, the fuel, all of those types of things. Those are your costs associated with running that service. And so the way that you get that number up is by putting more people on that train. And so that's where our focus is now, is increasing the ridership, so that you're offsetting that number of what your sunk cost is by paying. Now, obviously the what we pay and what things cost in the area that we live in, I think we can all agree that it's expensive to live here. There's a high cost of living for the area we live in. So I think that we have to be reasonable as to what that number can be in the future, because we do have to pay our employees, a certain amount of money to be able to afford to live in this area. So, can we influence that number? Absolutely. But we're also have to keep in mind that we're going to have to pay a certain rate to pay a livable wage to live here. So it's a balancing act. The easiest thing to do is to increase the number that you divide by, which is the ridership number. And so that's why my goals are set for 5,000 plus riders a day. And everything that I'm doing is focused on increasing that ridership.
So I think, following up on that, I think one of the challenges is almost every transit system has a subsidy. And so the question is for SMART, what is the fair subsidy, whether it be, $40 or $60 or $18?
Well, I've taken on the approach, and if you ask any of my staff, they'll tell you what I think about it. I think that, my vision for SMART is full 3-car trains. Our system is designed to run 3-car trains, and that's what I want to see. I want to see every train, full. I want to see people getting on and off. Obviously, there's a certain number of seats on the train, but you can carry more people than there are seats if people are circulating through the system. So if you have people riding a couple of stations, hopping off, more people getting on, you can increase those numbers. And so for me, that's my vision. I want to get to full 3-car trains. And that's, if you ask anybody on staff here, it's very clear what my vision is for SMART is full 3-car trains every trip. And people circulating through those trains, not just, I mentioned it earlier, and I don't know if everybody caught it, but right now the average trip length is about 21 miles. And at 21 miles, you have a certain number of seats, right? But if you get people taking shorter trips and circulating on and off, and, just going a couple of stations, obviously that could increase your ridership numbers substantially. So those are a couple of things we look at. We look at total ridership, but we also look at average trip length of that ridership to determine, where we have alternative capacity. But one of the ways to increase that ridership number quickly is getting people to take shorter trips on the train, just going a couple of stations for their commuting needs.
Okay, there's a comment about people have read that there's some talk of SMART expanding to Vallejo via 37, Highway 37. And the question pertains to, does it make sense for SMART to look at that before they've expanded to Cloverdale, which was what the voters were promised in the original measure?
Mm-hmm. So I think that, there's obviously there's project development going on one side, and then we're continuing to work towards getting to Cloverdale. I think we have capacity to talk about both at the same time. But, I think that, one is they're kind of in two different phases. I think one is kind of in that development phase, and the other one is more about getting it done. And so we've really been working hard on making sure that we deliver upon what the original promise was, which was getting to Cloverdale. However, there is other folks that are interested in an alignment along Highway 37. And so we're working on that, but it's more of the development phase of that. We're not taking any focus on getting the train of what the original promise was of getting the train to Cloverdale. And I think I would encourage your listeners to go back and listen to the board meeting at the February 18th meeting. And I talked about this and kind of the strategy moving forward of getting there. I think if we're able to secure this funding and get the smart line to Healdsburg, that's going to be a big part of that. And my priority is to keep working on securing the funding to get to Cloverdale, and then keeping our eye on developments along Highway 37. So I think, in short, I think that we can do both. One's in development phase, and the other one's in securing the funding phase.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about, I know that recently the SMART board approved a renovated or revised Citizens Oversight Committee. Can you talk a little bit about their role? I know that one of their proposed members is here with us today. So can you talk about that committee and how you see its role?
Yeah, so I think it's really good. Our board did kind of expand. They wrote kind of new bylaws, and it kind of expanded the role of the Citizens Oversight Committee. Really, before it was more just about this, this longer range plan. But there's other things that board can do, or that Citizens Oversight Committee can do. So it's really just about expanding the role of that. That group is going to meet quarterly, and we will share with them kind of what's going on. Obviously, the long range planning piece of that, and the financials will be a big piece of that. But we are basically expanding the role of the COC. And they'll be meeting quarterly. Before, there were, sometimes many months, maybe even a year between meetings. And it had a kind of a sole focus on this long range plan, our strategic plan. And so now it'll be more about kind of getting that committee more engaged in what's going on at SMART. Obviously, there'll still be that financial piece and the long range planning piece. But there'll also be some additional opportunities there to engage with the public and hear from the Citizens Oversight Committee, which can be taken on up the chain to the board.
I noted that the league, the Marin and Sonoma leagues have a joint working committee on SMART, and Eddie's been kind enough to meet with us on a regular basis. So we're most appreciative of that. We're very interested in this, in working with SMART and in issues that they're facing. But one of the things that we were disappointed in and is that we had proposed, we had nominated a candidate for the Citizens Oversight Committee. That person was not selected. So can you talk a little bit about the selection process? Maybe not specifically our situation, but.
Yeah, so we took all of the applicants. The board put together an ad hoc committee. I believe we had 5 members on that. They went through applications. They looked through things. That ad hoc committee met. They discussed the pros and cons of each candidate and ultimately selected 9. And I know one of them is in this meeting today, Danny Sheehan. And then they took that back to the full board, and the full board approved that at the February, I believe it was the 15th meeting.
Are there other ways that you could get, or if people want to become more involved in providing comments, public comments, or serving on maybe additional committees that could assist SMART with recommendations and other issues? Is there consideration for developing things like that?
There absolutely is. You know, something I pitched to the board, I don't know, maybe 6 or 8 months ago. I don't remember exactly when it was, but I think there's room for another committee. Maybe not a full-on Brown Act committee, but almost like a general manager and executive team kind of advisory type committee. I don't know if it'd be a Brown Act type committee or not, but just that opportunity to bounce ideas off of and really get more public input and more groups that can have influence on decision making and provide feedback on those types of things. I haven't pulled the trigger on that yet. I did talk to the board about the idea. The board liked the idea of it. I don't know exactly what that would look like at this point in time, but I really wanted to wait until we got these new Citizens Oversight Committee. We did expand the role of that committee, and then understand what our gaps are and how we would formulate another committee that maybe fills some of those gaps and not be repetitive. But I am interested in having another committee of citizens that are able to provide feedback and bounce ideas off of as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. Well, we've covered quite a bit of subjects today. The league is as I mentioned before, the league is very interested in supporting SMART as it moves forward. Do you have any suggestions about specific things the league can do?
You know, I think doing things like this and letting me come from time to time and share kind of what's going on and where things are at, also getting your feedback, I know from time to time you share information with me. I'm fully aware that we have a lot of work to do. And if you attend the board meetings or if you talk to any of my staff, I don't underestimate how much work we have to do. We have a lot of work to do with our system. We have a lot of work to do with the voters. And I realize that, and I want to make sure we do that work. There's a lot of work. There's a lot of work that has to be done out there, but we're prepared to do it. And I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Okay, sure. One last question, and we touched upon this a little earlier, but how far in advance of putting the measure on the ballot to extend the sales tax do you need to envision putting together a group to advocate for that measure and to plan an effective campaign?
I don't know. It's not that I don't think about it. We don't talk about it internally. I'm not going to lie about that. But I think, we have to have all of our ducks in a row, right? We have to know that this is going to be successful. And I just feel like there's a lot of work to do. And I don't know if we were to put it on the ballot today that it would pass. I go out, I meet, I talk to people. There's some people that said, hey, we feel like Smart's turned a corner. We feel like you're more accessible. We feel like you're listening to us. So we feel like things are getting better. But I'm not naive enough to believe that we've done all the work, right? And so, timing wise, I don't know. Getting 67% of the vote is a lot. That's a tall order for anybody, for anything. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we possibly can, to meet the needs of the community. And I tell staff, if you ask anyone on my staff, my vision for the SMART train is to meet the needs of the community. And I think once we get there, then we'll be able to effectively pass the sales tax. Is it something that I think about and worry about? Of course it is, right? We have some time, but we need to make progress, and we need to be thinking about that every day of the week. But I don't know exactly when we will go and put this on the ballot. Obviously, it has to go at some point. Is 24 the right time? Has enough work been done by 24? Traditionally, in my background and experience, if you were going to do something like this, you would do it in a presidential election, getting more turnout. So if you went with that strategy, would you do it in 24? Would you wait till 28? And knowing in 28 that, that could be the last hurrah there. So, it's not that I'm trying to sidestep that question, Kevin. It's just that, I don't know the answer today. Have we done enough work to get this done in 24? Or is it something that we need to look at a future year on? Does it need to be in a presidential election? Could it go in 26? I just don't know the answer to that. Right now, and you can ask anyone on my staff, my focus right now is making the SMART train as good as we can possibly make it, and making sure that it meets the needs of the community. And, seeing our ridership grow and come back is very refreshing. The emails that I get from people that, reach out to me and tell me they took the train for the very first time and it was wonderful and they're going to be a regular rider. I mean, those things make me feel like we're making progress, but I'm also a realist and know that we have a long way to go and there's still a lot of work that has to be done. But what I can tell the community with a straight face is I'm here to do that work, and I'm here to make the adjustments that need to be made to ensure that the SMART train meets the needs of the community, and it's here for the long term, and it's going to be meeting the needs of the community in the long term.
Just following up on that, when this measure previously passed, there was a coalition of groups, including the league, business community, the bicycle community, environmentalist, and others that worked together in helping get the thing passed. And logically, it seemed to me that you would require a similar group this time.
Absolutely.
So what, I mean, it seems like it's important that group, if you haven't already, you start working on building that coalition, and then you can determine when to put it on the ballot. So has there been any effort to rebuild that coalition?
No, I haven't made any effort in doing that. This is something that, obviously need to talk to the board about and get their take on when they're interested in doing this. Our focus right now, Kevin, to be honest with you, is coming in, and I told the board, I feel like there's a lot of work that needs to be done. And right now we're focused on doing that work. But at some point, you're right, we have to shift gears and we have to think about long-term and when we pull that group together. And it's the right time to pull that group together, next week, next month, next year. That's a conversation that we absolutely have to have and need to have. I'm always interested to hear people's feedback is if they think that we've done enough work to get 2/3 vote. To be honest with you, when I ask that question, I don't always hear what I want to hear. And people feel like there is still more work that needs to be done. And so right now, today, that's where my focus is making sure that we do everything possible to make sure that the SMART train is meeting the needs of the community. And that's where my focus is. But at some point, it's the elephant in the room. We have to pass that sales tax to ensure, our long-term sustainability. So it has to be on the pipeline. It's not something I talk about all the time in the public, but rest assured, it is always on my mind of thinking about how do you do it and what's the right timing to do it. But right now, my staff and I are focused on making sure that the train meets the needs of the community the best we possibly can. And I think most in this room will agree with me. We still have some work to do.
Thank you, Eddie. We very much appreciate your being candid with us.
Mm-hmm.
We look forward to having you back in the future.